a trade war with America's closest neighbor, a quiet military buildup on the Horn of Africa, and a superpower rivalry with China that never fully resolved, still shadowed by a war 8,000 kilometers away in the Persian Gulf. Start with the neighbor. On July 20, 2026, President Trump signed 3 presidential proclamations, invoking a rarely used century-old power, Section 338 of the Tariff Act of 1930, to impose an additional 50% tariff on a broad swath of Canadian goods. The headline targets are dairy, alcohol, and motor vehicles. The White House frames it as retaliation for what it calls discriminatory Canadian trade practices. But read the fine print, and the tariff reaches much further. Electronics, furniture, building materials, textiles, chemicals, hundreds of product lines most people never think of as part of a trade war. Spare goods that are certified compliant under the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Trade Agreement. Even USMCA-protected goods are exposed. The clock is real. The tariffs take effect at 1 minute past midnight Eastern Time on August 19, 2026. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney told reporters on August 6 that his negotiators are trying to head it off, but even he wouldn't promise it. His words were simply, "We'll see." The Bank of Canada has already done the math on what happens if talks fail. Its estimate: Canadian GDP could end 2026 roughly 1.5% lower than it would have been without this fight, with about half of that loss coming from reduced long-term economic potential, not just short-term disruption. 3. In the automotive sector alone, Canadian exports to the U.S. have already fallen by 22%, $5.6 billion, in the 12 months leading into this escalation. 3. That's not a forecast. That already happened, before the new 50% tariff even takes effect. This is a trade war between allies. 2 economies that have been integrated for generations, pulling apart in real time, 3 days from now, on a deadline that may or may not move. Now to the second front, one most people aren't watching at all. On the northeastern coast of Somalia, in a port city called Bosaso, the United States has just signed an agreement to expand its military footprint 5. The deal was struck directly with the government of Puntland, a semi-autonomous region of Somalia, meeting with the commander of U.S. Special Operations Command Africa 5. Officially, the stated purpose is counterterrorism and maritime security. Unofficially, the timing tells a different story. Bosaso sits on the Gulf of Aden, a direct launchpad toward Yemen, where Iran-backed Houthi rebels have just declared a new maritime blockade on Saudi Arabia's Red Sea ports, reigniting a conflict that had been in ceasefire since 2022. 5. An expanded American base here isn't really about Somalia. It's about everything happening around Somalia. The war in Yemen, the closure of the Strait of Hormuz 1,100 kilometers to the north, and the scramble by Saudi Arabia to reroute its oil exports through the Red Sea instead. 7. And Bosaso isn't the only offer on the table. Somaliland, a breakaway region that's functioned as its own de facto state since 1991, has offered the U.S. a base at its deep-water port of Berbera. 7. The U.S. Africa Command Commander, General Dagvin Anderson, personally toured that port and its security operations. 7. Meanwhile, Somalia's federal government in Mogadishu, watching Somaliland Court Washington, made its own competing offer, reviving a security cooperation framework that dates all the way back to 1980, explicitly trying to remain, in its words, the only lawful American security partner in the region. 8.